Hello again. I just wanted to provide a shortish update, assuming I can avoid rambling, on the combined SAM and VDG system I've been working on. Last time around I had working video and it was generating all of the signals I was hoping for. Right now, what I have is a lump of scrap silicon. The dev board was originally fitted with a Max 2 EPM 570, which was roomy enough to try out the basics, but proved inadequate for the job of running the enhanced video modes that I'd worked so hard on. The answer was the EPM 570's big brother, the EPM 1270, which neatly doubles, plus changed the level of resource available to the hardware. The chips use exactly the same footprint and pinout, which doubles as a huge bonus, but comes with a price. In order to fit the new chip, I have to first remove the old one without damaging anything else. In practice, this meant removing all of the components on the reverse of the board so I can put the affair on my soldering hot plate whilst heating the front of the board with a hot air wand to set the old EPM 570 free and send it off to pasture. After much frustration, I finally got that chip out, and fitting the new one was so easy by comparison. Or so I thought. The result was immediate progress, and I was able to bolt the upgrades in and provide the video samples previously demonstrated. It all went wrong when it was plugged into a real system. The result was a static display, no signs of life from the computer. It took a while to find, but it all came down to one pin on the new chip that decided it didn't want to be attached to the board properly. Typically, this would mean a dead signal, but in this case it was a power pin. The chip has several, so one missing pin isn't obvious, but it also means that power is shared through internal routing that wasn't meant to work that way. And over the week or so that I had been incrementally improving the design, the power channels had basically gone into a death spiral, and while 75% of the chip was still operating, one corner was dead to the outside world, where the I/O drivers burned themselves out trying to work. Bizarrely, the internal logic was still working, but that means very little when the missing signals are the essential things, such as the main clock. While I could technically repair this board by swapping that dying IC out, the wiser, safer, but somewhat more expensive option was to just order new boards with the EPM 1270 ready fitted by someone that actually knows what they're doing. I now have the replacement boards, but they need some final assembly, and I have this small thing called a day job that gets in the way. Up to this point, I've been using an R2R resistor ladder to fulfill DAC duties and generate the analog signal to the video encoder. While this works, it isn't right. The signal voltages are just a little off, with the result that everything just looks washed out and dull. So ditching this approach as a moderately good idea but with better alternatives, I've pivoted to using a dedicated video DAC that converts 24-bit RGB into analog RGB in a single device. It also neatly synchronizes the channels, so the transition from one pixel to the next should be sharper. The downside to this approach is the video encoder doesn't fit in the remaining space. So I've moved the encoder onto its own little board that accepts the analog RGB and pumps out composite and S-video signals in return. Making this separate also means I don't have to generate composite video when most people are going to just use RGB or an RGB to HDMI device, and save a few pounds on the costs, which aren't trivial given the price of the encoder chip keeps going up and supplies are becoming more limited, just as I got this together. This would all be roses, except that over the last couple of months the price of the CPLD hosting all this has gone up too, and the price of the next generation FPGA equivalent has come down to the point where it is cheaper just to use the FPGA. Superficially this is good, except the FPGA has less general I/O, and the current solution uses every single available I/O pin. Not a total disaster, but potentially harmful if I need to expand things. Alongside all of this, I've been looking at the audio solution for the main design. It was originally a pair of emulated AY3-891 something chips, but this is beginning to look short-sighted given costs and the availability of a more powerful FPGA silicon that can more accurately fulfill the job of generating audio. Given the fact I've used up all of the I/O pins on my VDG SAM FPGA, I couldn't put this into double duty, so I would need to provide a second device. The problem there is cost once again. I'm doubling up on the silicon, and that means double the price. If I go for a bigger FPGA, I have to switch from using a QFP, quad fat package, IC with pins that can be hand soldered, probably badly given all that has happened so far, to using ball grid array packaging, which can be done manually but is best left to automated assembly. It also means that I go from using a 4-layer board to a 6 or 8-layer board in order to actually access the IC pins, and that means more cost. At this point, the cost benefits of using the cheap Max chip starts to fall away when the full fat solution to all this development is the RTX 7 FPGA chip, which offers more at the same price. In fact, not only does it offer more for the same price, it too has a shift in pricing that means the small version of the chip is actually 50% more than the next size up, and to sweeten that deal, it increases the I/O pins available. For those that care, the small 15T version essentially has one corner of the chip pins disabled, which means cramming all of the I/O into the other 3/4. The larger 35T chip opens them up, and this actually makes routing and placement easier too. So the new plan, or the new revised replacement plan, is to use the RTX 7 chip in embiggened form to do the whole VDG and SAM functionality with enhancements, and to perform audio delivery too, not forgetting the fact that the big FPGA version of the design also includes a handy soft CPU core too, without redesigning everything each time. The initial target system is my rather homebrew ATX format version of the Dragon that lets me switch subsystem components during testing. Once that is working, I will order up the Rev 3.5 Dragon boards and prove that is working. The Rev 3.5 will need a few modifications to A, put the audio connections in place, B, add an audio DAC, and C, include provision for a fallback audio setup, probably two AY3-8913 chips. I still want to include a cheap option for the core, but that won't include audio on board. The simplest solution is to use the opened up peripheral addressing to slot in existing proven audio hardware. Finally, I want to manage some expectations. Yes, I am getting very close to the end, or an end, to this journey that has lasted far too long already. I'm not rushing it, but it needs to reach a conclusion, and the features and hardware are pretty much decided. One of the reasons for moving a bit slowly is the sheer cost of iterating the physical design. The current CPLD boards cost about £140 per order of 2 devices, plus some spare PCBs. This isn't mega expensive, but it isn't pocket change either. The FPGA version of the design bumps that up to over £200. One of the reasons why it hasn't actually been ordered yet. I have generic dev boards that I can try the HDL code on to prove it works, but this isn't the same thing. I had originally hoped to use those dev boards as a shortcut, but thanks to everything going on in the world, the manufacturers decided not to make any more of them. I can have them made, they're open source, but without big batch sizes, the price per board is too much to justify when I can just have a fully integrated board built that answers all of the remaining questions. The final point to cover right now is that I am using SRAM for the 4MB system memory. The availability of stock is very variable, and as a result, I have to use what can be found at the time, and that means reworking the board design pretty much every time I have anything made. I've grabbed some stock of the chips, so I can assemble that part myself if necessary, but as demonstrated, my soldering abilities, while not particularly bad, are not reliable enough for bulk assembly. Plus it is slow, smelly, hot, time-consuming work, and I'm slow, smelly, and hot enough as it is. As it stands, I am one or maybe 2 iterations away from a finished solution in terms of hardware. The HDL code that goes into the CPLDs and FPGAs can continue iterating away, but even that is getting very close to finished, or finished enough that I can safely hand over the design and be reasonably confident it will work. At this point, rather than a complete commercial product, it will be something that you can try out in anger while informing me of just how wrong it is and why on earth did you do it that way. After some feedback, I expect to have a proper release version of the design done and dusted fairly quickly, provided no one finds any real clangers and I don't have to go away and completely rewrite the whole thing. Then we're on to the meat and veg of the situation, the actual fabrication and assembly of the design. Assuming there are no radical changes in pricing, it is likely to sit around £200 for an assembled Dragon 3.5 board with an attached FPGA core. The smaller, less capable version of the core, no second CPU or fancy audio, is likely to be about £50 cheaper. Both of those prices are completely subject to external influences I have no control over. Plus, I would actually like to recoup some of the costs these upgrades have put me through. Adjacent to this, I plan to turn the smaller core board into a plug-in upgrade for your existing Dragons, and possibly Cocos. This will allow you to turn your existing hardware into something close to the Coco 3 specification, minus a few extra keys on the keyboard. This is no trivial matter. You have to perform some surgery to make it work, mostly removing a few key ICs and attaching some cables in their place. I don't have a price for this yet. Even as a vague estimate beyond, it is going to be cheaper than a full Rev 3.5 with the same core. I will stop there and save at least some details for another update once I have more to share. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to leave your thoughts and feedback in the comments.